Hey, folks, my name is Michael Cox, and welcome to the Heartwork podcast. Today is my inaugural podcast. It's too wild that we're here. I'm so excited to begin this journey, though. It's been a long time coming. I just want to give you a little bit of background. Who am I? We're going to talk about all those details, but how do we get here? The first thing to think about is I am in the throes of a great career as a counselor. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a dad. I'm a son. I'm a brother. I'm a friend. I'm all of those things. And in the midst of doing those things, I've learned a few things about life, about how to deal with life. More importantly, that how do we bring back structure to the family and restore the family? Coming back to the work of the heart and understanding what's going on with individuals. That's what we are. That's what we're going to cover in this. But how did this start? So I never wanted to do a podcast. I never wanted to do any of those things. And suddenly here we are. Where did it start? I remember having a conversation with my wife one time, and I was prompted by a mentor that said, hey, Michael, the work that you're doing, you probably should capture that in a book. And I thought, I'm not really excited about doing a book. Never wanted to write a book. And so I put it off for a number of different years. And so in doing so, my wife and I were talking one day, and she said, Michael, really something to think about is what comes simple to you or what comes easy to you does it for others, and others need to hear it. That began this journey for me, began this journey of maybe I should be capturing what I'm doing. The mentor also said to me, hey, you really should capture this, and it's some great work that's going on. So I was like, okay, we'll start this journey. And so we began a journey almost 7-8 years ago of writing this book. Well, the book is soon to be coming out. And what we learned was I need a little bit more of a social presence, need to get some following. Why not do a podcast? So here we are. And we're going to talk about doing the work of the heart. And we're going to do that from the lens of the family and community. Being able to see how individuals are impacted within family, being able to restore the structure of the family within a community. That's where my heart lies. And what has come from that is a years of work, working with families, working with teenagers. I'm sitting on almost 30 years of working with teenagers. Literally, I have been working with teenagers since I was one. Started at 19 as an intern for my youth pastor at the time, and here we are. Did a number of years of ministry, went back to school, got a graduate degree in counseling, and now I've been doing counseling for a number of years and love that. But what came of that after being a husband and a father, a son, all those different things, is I realized there's experiences that I had in my own personal life that affected my professional life and vice versa. And as I began to capture this work in this book and different things, I began to realize maybe there is something here. Maybe there's something that we want to and need to be able to share with the community. So here we are. We're talking about Heartwork, and we're going to talk about the structure of that in just a moment, what that looks like and how that impacts individuals. But we're going to be bringing together all of those things of who I am. My counseling practice is called Whole Life Priorities for a reason, because we look at the whole person, but more particularly, we're looking here about the work of the heart. And what does that look like in impacting marriages? What does that look like in impacting parent-child relationships? What does that look like in community? All of those things is what we're going to do. Where did it start for us personally? And this gives you a little bit of glimpse into who I am. Again, I told you that I'm a father and I'm a husband. I'm the father and husband that shares life with Coloma. And next month is going to be our 24th wedding anniversary. But it started with us going on a marriage, what's called a marriage intensive. We went, and the purpose for us going on that intensive was for us to go and learn a method, right? We were going to go learn how to do this method of work with couples. And so we go to this retreat, we get there, and we're thinking, hey, it's a chance to get away. We're going to learn all these different things. And what we realize is, our marriage was actually kind of jacked up. We've been married for 10 years at this time. And we began to realize there were some things that we hadn't been talking about, things we hadn't been working on. And simultaneously, I had just graduated from grad school with my master's degree in counseling. And so we learned this method that revolutionized our marriage. It revolutionized how we engage with each other. We got a chance to see how our pasts, before we ever even met each other, how they impacted our current, our present, our relationship, and eventually how it was impacting us as parents. And begin on a journey that has saved us through a lot of different journeys as a couple. And I think it also carried us through some journeys as parents. So we were living that journey individually or as couple. and began walking with other couples in that process. Well, in that process, in this method, it's called restoration therapy. You'll hear more about it. But in this method, because I was already working with teenagers, I just thought, let's go ahead and engage teenagers with this. And so I was engaging teenagers. And along that journey, a mentor of mine, I wasn't a mentor at the time, but became one, said, founder of this model said, hey, you need to be capturing what you're doing. You need to be capturing what's going on. I think we need to write a book. Well, I didn't want to write a book. I didn't want to mess with a book at the time. I thought, what's the necessary? I just want to do the work of working with teenagers and work with their families and helping them out. And we began talking. He said, you really should capture what you're doing and what's happening in that work. Well, what I realized was I had been working with teenagers for a very long time and felt like I was doing great work with teenagers. But unfortunately, that work with teenagers sometimes fell flat because those teenagers went home to parents. And those parents really didn't have or weren't equipped to know how to help those teenagers as I was helping them. And so we began capturing this work and realized, you know what, we've got to work with parents. We kind of started doing some work with couples. We started doing some work and helping couples with my wife and myself, and then me professionally, helping out couples. And I just realized, you know what, we've got to help parents. If we're going to help parents, we've got to help marriages. Well, if we're going to help marriages, we've got to help families. And it just began to breed and birth this new work that we are now looking at now. So in the fall, what's going to happen? We have a book coming out, or I have a book coming out. It's addressing parenting, but it's more specifically how do parents help with self-regulation. What I know and what I've found out is oftentimes as a parent, you're going to hear stories of what happened with Cloma and myself. What I found out was that we oftentimes are trying to correct our child's behavior. We're trying to change what they are engaging in and to fix what's going on with them. But what we're missing sometimes in that, in the effort of trying to change a parent's behavior, it's a whole lot less about the child, and a whole lot more about the parent. And so in that, trying to help figure out how do parents learn how to self-regulate and how do they understand what's going on with themselves before they engage with their child? What's happening internally with their emotions? What's going on with their heart so that they can get into a healthy place and then be able to engage their child? So this journey has been something I've walked personally and professionally. And in the Heartwork, what we're going to do is look at both of those. We're going to look at what's going on. You're going to get to hear stories about me and my kids. Maybe we're going to bring them in here. You're going to hear stories about me and my wife. We're going to bring her in here. Just here an opportunity to hear how we align my personal walk, my personal journey with what I've learned professionally and how it's going to be something that hopefully helps you. What is the core of that? At the core of that, there's three things that I really think about when it comes to how do we help individuals through that process. And you're going to hear us hit on these topics multiple times. But there's a few things when we talk about the heart. It's equipping the heart. How do we help individuals understand what's going on with them internally, emotionally, spiritually? How do they know what's happening that causes some of this weird adverse response? What can we do about that? So it's really looking at the work of how do we regulate those emotions? How do we get individuals to a place to just know what's going on, what's happening within themselves? So we're going to talk about equipping hearts. And that might be you as an individual. That might be you in a marriage, in a relationship. That might be you in your church, in your community, but helping you understand what's going on with yourself and what's happening in those heart wounds, the difficult things that are happening within yourself. We're also going to talk about restoring the home. Now, let's just be straight out there. Maybe it's going to be a little controversial for some of you, but I just want to be frank about what's going on. This is probably the core of why we're doing a lot of this, is realizing that today, that structure, that foundation of who the family is, building a strong family, it's really kind of lost, and there's not a whole lot of definition to it. We want to come from a place of how do we help families get rooted in two very basic things, love and trust. How do we help parents understand where are those violations happening within themselves that potentially are impacting their children, therefore impacting multiple generations after them, but also looking at maybe what has happened before they ever became parents that's now impacting them as parents. So we're going to look at how do we help restore homes and build strong families and help equip parents with the tools needed to move forward. Yeah, we talk about it in the book, and you're going to get to hear about that in the book. But more importantly, I want to talk about what does that look like within your own home. And then finally, we're going to look at empowering people. How do we help individuals seek this place of healing from a difficult place? Learning how to self-regulate in difficult times and learn how to move forward differently in relationships. You might see that there's a theme that's happening with all of these things at one point. All these are coming together. It's about the heart and leveraging what's going on within the individual and truly knowing the freedom that there is in self-regulation. So you can also hear that a lot as we talk. is what is self-regulation and being able to truly understand what's going on in me that's causing a reaction for someone else. A number of different things that are happening to that. Most of all, our goal and our desire is truly being able to look at the heart. My desire is to be able to look at the heart and understand what's going on in the individual. How do we use that to begin to see change and see direction shift and work through things? Coming back to some of our points of what we're doing and how does this impact individuals? And probably more importantly, what does that look like in impacting you as parents, you and your marriage, and you and your relationship? I want to give you a couple of examples. First example is, I told you we're the parents of 3 teenage boys. Maybe I didn't say that, but I'm saying it now. Parents of 3 teenage boys. And I remember a very specific interaction with our youngest son. At one point, our youngest son played soccer. And in playing soccer, he were going to practice. And on the way to practice one day, I said to him, I said, "Hey, son, have you been practicing the drills that the coach has given you?" Well, I knew he hadn't been practicing, but I wanted to ask him. And so I said, "Son, have you been practicing?" And he's like, "Oh, no, and I haven't been doing that. It really isn't important." Kind of brushed it off. So we get to practice. And at practice, it goes through practice. And I'm talking with the coach afterwards. Coach calls him over and he says, "Hey, son, hey, have you been practicing? Have you been working on the drills?" And he's able to admit to the coach, said, "No, I haven't been." And in that moment, as a parent, I said, "Hey, look, I took my I told you so moment." And I said, "Look, son, I told you it's important to practice. This is why your practicing is necessary and why dad is pushing you." Well, as we're leaving, we're walking to the car, and I noticed my son's head's drooping a little bit, and he is down. Like I can tell he's upset, maybe even a little crying going on. We get to the car, and I asked him, I said, "What's going on?" And he says, "Hey, Dad, you embarrassed me. You embarrassed me in front of the coach back there." And I was like, "What do you mean I embarrassed you?" Well, he replays the scenario, and I realize that something's building. And suddenly within me as a dad, I'm feeling like, what did I do? I messed this up. Man, I've jacked it up as a parent. We get to a local spot. We're going to grab us something to drink. And we're sitting there, we're talking, we're going back and forth. And he's kind of pushing back. I'm feeling this stirring within myself, trying to figure out what's going on. And I realize we're in what I would call a pain cycle. My son is just simply trying to tell me what his perspective is. I'm trying to make sure I push in as a dad. And at some point, it's not going where I want to. Maybe my tone is getting a little louder. And I just shut down. And my son, at the time, I think he was 10 or 11 years old, said, "Dad, I hate when you do that." I said, "What do you mean you hate when I do that?" He said, I hate when you shut down. We're just trying to talk. And I'm just trying to tell you what I'm feeling and what's going on. It was in that moment I began realizing all this work that I had been doing, all the stuff that I had been learning. Thankfully, my child had been learning it. I don't know how much direct work we've been doing, but he had been learning it. In that moment as a parent, I'm simply trying to get him to behave differently, right? I'm trying to get him to practice and do the skills that he's supposed to do. And it's not quite working. So now suddenly I'm feeling like, am I a bad dad? I'm not communicating well with my son. So if I push in harder, maybe he's going to listen. That didn't work. So I'm just shutting down. And in shutting down, my son was able to see that. And amazingly, in that moment, my son was able to self-regulate. Hopefully what we're going to do in this process is begin realizing that it's not the role of that child to self-regulate, but we're going to teach him how to do that. It's that role of the parent to recognize in that moment, what's going on in me as a parent that would cause me to try to bully my son to get things done as opposed to really just being able to engage. That's one of many stories, and it's a short story, and you're going to get to hear it again later in another podcast and how we expand upon that. But most importantly, what we're trying to do is help you realize it's not so much about what the kid is doing, what the kid isn't doing, what's going on with you as a parent. In your marriage, you're going to potentially the same thing. It's not about what she's doing, it's not about what I'm doing, it's about what's going on individually, and how is that impeding our ability to move forward as a couple. So the heart work comes back to those very simple things of realizing what's happening with the individual and how do we work differently in this. But we're looking at it at multiple different levels. We're looking at it from the perspective of community, individual, and probably most important, at least from my heart, is what is the heartbeat of the family? How do we do the real work on the family to help them be and become and who they really want to be? So what do we need from you? There's a couple of things that we need. This is a new podcast. There's some things that we're going to ask of you. The first thing is subscribe, follow this podcast, share it with everyone that you know. Get that information out there. We need some help with getting the word out about this information and learning some new tools. So share it, subscribe. We're going to be on YouTube. We're going to be on TikTok. We're going to be on Facebook, Instagram, all of the socials. We're going to be there. And so please come join us in the process. There is a website coming very soon. The website is going to be michaelscox.com. Get that again, michaelscox.com, coming very, very soon. Please like it, subscribe, follow us. And most of all, thank you again for listening to the Heartwork podcast. I'm Michael Cox. We'll see you next time.